Hello and welcome to Cars with Kasey, episode 10. In this episode, I'll be discussing the production story of the Chevrolet Corvette. This story must start at the beginning of World War II. During World War II, many young men in the U.S. were drafted or recruited into the European war effort, and many of these young men, unsurprisingly, sought excitement without the horrors of war. So, many of these young men discovered sports cars while in Europe, and by the time they came home, they had grown fond of their little MGs, Jaguars, and others, and brought them back home to the U.S. A few American automakers took note of this, including General Motors. In 1951, Nash Motors of the U.S. teamed up with British carmaker to make the first sports car since the war. The Nash Healey was also very highly priced, leaving no affordable sports cars in the U.S. So, the lead stylist of GM, Harvey Earl, convinced GM that they needed an affordable two-seater sports car in their lineup. With success, he began working on the Corvette in late 1951. The result of the secret Project Opal team was the EX-122 prototype, revealed in 1953. The Project Opal car would then go into mild production later that year, but MSRP had grown to about $3,500, far more than the $2,000 Earl had in mind. For reference, $3,500 is roughly $43,000 in today's money. The costly little roadster utilized many already existing parts to reduce costs. The Corvette used the chassis and suspension from Chevrolet's passenger vehicles at the time, though the drivetrain and cabin were moved backwards to achieve better balance. Power came from a 3.9-liter inline-six that produced 150 horsepower, which was sent to the rear tires through a two-speed automatic. These were the only drivetrain options for the original Corvette. The Corvette had a wheelbase of 102 inches, an overall length of 167.3 inches, a width of 69.8 inches, and a height of 51.5 inches, and it weighed about 2,800 pounds. Three body styles were concepted: a Roadster, a Fastback, and a Shooting Brake. The Roadster went into production, the Fastback was canceled, and the Shooting Brake went into production as the Chevrolet Nomad. In 1953, just 300 Corvettes were built by hand, each one slightly unique. All 1953 models came with red interiors, white exteriors, and a blue engine. They could also come with a black canvas soft top. Heaters and radios were optional, and all 300 of them have them. They had independent front suspension but had a solid rear axle. At least 200 of these original all-American sports cars are still surviving today. But these first Corvettes were awful. They had severe quality control issues, such as body panels not lining up properly, water leaks, doors that would open themselves even during driving. At the end of 1953, Chevrolet opened a new factory that was ready to produce 10,000 Corvettes a year, although quality control issues left a stain on the Corvette's popularity, reducing sales. In 1954, more colors became available, those being blue, red, and black. All but the blue Corvettes still had the red interiors, and the blue ones had beige interiors and canvas tops. Only 3,640 of these Corvettes were built, but by the end of the year, about 30% of them still sat on dealership lots. Upon surveys of Corvette owners, 36% of them had previously owned a foreign sports car. The preference for the Corvette over them was immense. However, most of them did not consider the Corvette a true sports car, and there was extensive complaints about the body still leaking water. In 1953, Corvette began offering a V8 as optional upgrade to the inline-six. The 4.3-liter V8 produced 195 horsepower, and almost all Corvettes took that upgrade. Later in the year, a 3-speed manual transmission became available to buyers, but only about 75 of the 55 Corvettes had them. The new V8 and manual were the work of Zora Arkus Duntov, nicknamed the father of the Corvette. There are now at least 5 exterior color options, 4 interior colors, and 3 roof colors, also available in different materials. V8-powered Corvettes used more powerful electrical systems, and they had an enlarged V symbol in the logo, while 6-cylinder models still used the old logo. Only 700 of the 1955 models were built. In 1956, the Corvette was facelifted. The inline-six was discontinued, and the V8 saw power increase to 210 to 240 horsepower. The 3-speed manual was now the standard, and 2-speed automatic was optional. The new Corvette also had roll-up windows and upgraded convertible top. 3,467 of these Corvettes were built. 1957 Corvettes now had a 4.6-liter V8 with fuel injection greatly increasing power as an expensive option. As Zorro wanted the Corvette to get into racing, the 57 Corvettes could also be optioned with air enhancements, heavy-duty suspension, and bigger tires. 1957 also saw the first year of Corvette racing in the 24 hours at Le Mans with the Corvette SS. In 1958, the Corvette received a major facelift. It now had double headlights and much more chrome on the body. 1958 also saw a revision to the interior, and it was the first year that seatbelts would come factory installed rather than dealership optioned. In 1959, the Corvette saw some minor revisions inside and out, and a 4-speed manual was now standard equipment instead of the 3-speed. 1959 was also the only model year with an available turquoise convertible top. 1960 saw a little change to the Corvette, and 1961 saw the addition of the now iconic twin taillights, whereas previously single taillights sat on top of the fenders. The fuel injection engines saw slight power increases in 1961. A larger engine also made its debut in 1962 with a 5.4-liter V8 producing 250 horsepower, and the dual-carb V8s were no longer available. In 1963, Chevrolet introduced the C2 Corvette on a new chassis and with entirely new styling. The body was, for the first time, designed with the help of a wind tunnel and engineers to help streamline tooling. The C2 was dubbed the Stingray after the racing team, and now had pop-up headlights. The fastback Corvette finally made its debut as well, now with an iconic split rear window. The car had a shorter wheelbase, improved steering, and an all-new chassis to improve the handling of the car. While interior storage was improved, the rear trunk hatch was removed, meaning cargo had to be loaded through the seats. Other notable upgrades included stronger drum brakes, an alternator instead of a generator, independent rear suspension, optional power steering, and many other suspension upgrades. The Corvette still had the same 3 engine options and the same 3 transmissions as before. Now marketed to everyone, the Corvette had record-breaking sales, or about 21,513 Corvettes sold, which was split roughly between the classic convertible or the new coupe, though most coupes came with the lift-off roof. The Z06 package came in with a new 36.5-gallon fuel tank, up from the standard 20-gallon tank. In 1964, the split rear window was dropped in favor of a single, large rear window, and the fake hood vents on the Corvette were also dropped for the 1964 year. Progressive spring rates further improved comfort without sacrificing handling. The car was also soundproofed and better insulated and had better transmission mounts and quieter transmission linkage. The 2 top-end engines had slight power increases, and the 2 4-speed transmissions were replaced by in-house equivalents that improved reliability. In the 1964 model year, coupe sales dropped slightly, but convertible sales rose, meaning the 1964 years was another record breaker. In 1965, the C2 saw the introduction of 3 vertical vents on either side of the front end, just behind tires. The wheels and interior also saw minor changes, and a 6.5-liter V8 appeared halfway through the year, producing 425 horsepower. Another 340 horsepower 5.4-liter V8 also appeared, which had a smaller oil pan. The small oil pan made the 350-horse engine, coded L79, available with power steering, which had previously only been an option on low-power engines. 4-wheel disc brakes became an option, though they had minor issue that the brakes were always touching the rotors, causing drag and friction. However, the drag was negligible and did not affect the efficiency of the vehicle, and the constant friction actually kept the brakes clean and made the brakes last an impressive 57,000 miles. Side exhausts also became an option, as did telescoping steering wheels. 23,562 of these cars were made. In 1966, the 6.5-liter V8 now had 390 and 425 horsepower options, but the fuel-injected small block was dropped. A 7-liter big block V8 also made its appearance with 425 horsepower, but with a lot more torque than the 6.5-liter V8. Most of the small engine options were discontinued, leaving only the 300 and 350 horsepower versions. The transmission options stayed in the 2-speed automatic, 3-speed manual, or 2 4-speed manual options. The grille was redesigned and the coupe lost the roof vents. The car can now be optioned with headrests. In 1966 was another record-breaking year with 27,720 units sold. The C-3 Corvette was supposed to launch in 1967. However, a last-minute notice of aerodynamic flaws delayed the production, so the C-2 stayed in production for one more year. 1967 saw the C-2 get 5-slot vents on either side rather than the previous 3-slot vents. 1967 also saw the Corvette gain reverse lights, a single one in the middle. The handbrake was moved to be between the seats instead of below the dash, and the interior had minor changes. An upgraded 7-liter V8 could be optioned, producing an advertised 430 horsepower, though many experts claim it to be closer to 560 horsepower. The 7-liter V8 required 103-octane racing fuel and could not be refueled at just any gas station. In order to get the upgraded 7-liter, the car needed to be optioned with a limited-slip differential, transistorized ignition, upgraded suspension, power brakes, and a deletion of the heater and defroster. Only 20 of those were sold out of the 22,940 Corvettes sold that year. After the famous Mako Shark design car, the iconic styling of the C3 won over Zora's mid-engine C3 design. However, the rear roof design and rear window came from Zora's design. The design was leaked by Hot Wheels weeks before the reveal using a GM-authorized model of the 1968 Corvette, labeled the Custom Corvette, which drew a lot of excitement for the car. The car still came in coupe or convertible options, but this time the coupe was now a notchback instead of a fastback, and it had T-top panels. The new Corvette had hiding windshield wipers that proved to be problematic. The doors sat flush on top of the doors. The car had a more modern instrument cluster than the previous Corvettes, including a speedometer, tachometer, oil pressure, water pressure, ammeter, and a clock, though the car now had no glove box. The batteries of the car were moved behind the seats for better balance, and the same drivetrain options remained except for a 3-speed automatic replacing the 2-speed option. The car also had a minor revision to the suspension. Cars with the small block engines now had flat, low-profile hoods, while big block engines had domed hoods to fit the engine in it. All this made for an exciting 1968 launch. For 1969, small block engines were upped from displacing 5.4 liters to 5.7 liters, and the car now had an option for white lettered tires. The flush door handles were revised to have a single-piece actuation, removing the need for buttons separate from the handle. The car now had backup lights integrated into the rear taillights, and the grills were made black instead of chrome. The car could also now have headlight washers, side exhausts, side vent trims, though the exhaust and vent options only lasted for 1969. On the interior of the car, the shoulder room was expanded, headrests were now standard, and the ignition was moved to the steering column, and the steering wheel was slightly shrunken, all to make the car more comfortable. Only for 1969 was the ZL1 option, which gave the car a 7-liter V8 producing 430 horsepower, and only 2 Corvettes actually came with this option. Other than that, the car was mostly unchanged from 1968. In 1970, the car received a few more exterior updates. The fenders were flared to reduce damage caused by thrown rocks, the grills were made into egg crate grills, and the side vents were also made into egg crates instead of the previous gills. The dual-tipped round exhausts were replaced by single rectangular exhaust, and the directional lamps were squared and enlarged. The interior had redesigned seats and a new luxury option that gave it wood accents, leather seats, and a carpeted interior. The positive traction axle, tinted glass, and long 4-speed manual became standard equipment. Red-lined wheels were also discontinued for this year. The LT1 was a new engine option, a 5.7-liter V8 producing 380 horsepower, which served as a high-performance option that could not be ordered with AC. The LT1 engine accounted for about 8% of the total cars, though it did set the Corvette's long-standing precedent of keeping up with high-priced European sports cars at a portion of the price. The ZR1 also made its first appearance, offering race suspension, brakes, stabilizers, and other pieces to cars equipped with the LT1 engine. As for the big blocks, there was now only one option, though its displacement increased to 7.4 liters to produce 390 horsepower. The 1971 models were nearly identical other than power loss due to encroaching emissions laws. The base 5.7 liter dropped to 270 horsepower, the LT1 dropped to 330, and the 7.4 dropped to 365, though a new 7.4 liter V8 called the LS6 was offered exclusively for the 1971 year. The LS6 provided 425 horsepower. The ZR2 made an appearance for 1 year only in 1971, and it was essentially all the upgrades for ZR1, but applied to the bigger and stronger LS6 engine. In 1972, the LS6 was dropped from the options, including its ZR2 package. Engine power ratings dropped further, though this was now because of Chevrolet switching from gross horsepower to the current net horsepower that is standard measurement in the US. The heavy-duty 4-speed was no longer available as an RPO, but it still came on ZR1 Corvettes. The LS5 engine came back as a 7.4-liter V8 with 270 horsepower, but it was banned by California. By 1972, convertibles were shrinking in sales. In 1973, the front chrome bumper was dropped, the side vents simplified, the body mounts were improved, and the tires were upgraded to improve comfort and style. The ZR1 and ZR2 packages were also discontinued. The bumper was replaced by a paint-matched 5-mile-per-hour bumper that was now required on U.S. cars, though the system added 35 pounds to the nose of the car. 2 small blocks were available, the L48 5.7-liter producing 190 horsepower, and the L82 producing 250 horses. The L82 was designed to pull harder at the top end, like a flat-plane Euro, and came in a fifth of all Corvettes in 1973. In 1973, the muscle car enthusiasm was dying down, and so were the demand for the torque-heavy big blocks that are beginning to seem uncivilized as the Corvette became more compared to foreign GTs than being its own type of car. The big block was replaced by the LS4 7.4-liter V8, which produced 275 horsepower. The big block dome bulges were replaced with cowl bulges, increasing unrated horsepower. In addition to adding power, the cowls kept the engine cool. A rare RPO coated Z07 gave the Corvette off-road suspension, but only 45 of these were built. A rear window of the C30 was no longer removable. In 1974, the C3s received a new rear end to match the front end of the Corvette, and the exhausts were now downturned to hide under it. Resonators were added to the exhaust to quiet the noise inside the cabin, and low-speed cooling was improved. The mirrors were widened, and the coupe now had seatbelts built into the vehicle rather than added afterwards. The Z07 off-road package now included better off-road suspension that could be ordered separate from the kit for just $7 regardless of trim or engine, though the Z07 package only came with a high-performance small block L82 or the big block LS4 for $400. In 1975, the Corvette no longer had a true dual exhaust system, as the Corvette now had a catalytic convertible, of which it only had one. Tachometers and ignition were now electric, and the speedometer caved to foreign influence, adding increments of the metric system. The big block engine was dropped, and small blocks lost power, dropping to 165 and 205 for the L48 and L82, respectively. With no big block option, the L82 was treated as one, with the hood badging and cowled hood. Both engines now ran on unleaded fuel. In 1976, the L82 was banned by California, and the L48 rose in power to 180 horsepower to compensate, as well as the L82 gaining 5 horses itself. The steel floor was introduced to block catalytic converter exhaust fumes, though it also made the vehicle lighter and quieter at the same time. While cowl hoods were still sold, they were no longer function in favor of a new ventilation system that achieved the same, plus less noise and less aerodynamic turbulence. Cast aluminum wheels were now available, reducing unsprung weight by 32 pounds. A new name badge was introduced, replacing the spaced-out previous badges. For non-tilting steering wheels, the 4-spoke wheel from the Chevy Vega was introduced with a smaller diameter. The convertible was dropped from the lineup as well. A better, maintenance-free battery was also introduced and placed in a sealed unit, and the rear window no longer used the forced air defroster, but instead used an in-window wire like modern cars. In 1977, the steering wheel was pushed 2 inches away from the driver, and the custom seats were now standard equipment. A redesigned center console also allowed for more radio options, and the 4-spoke steering wheel was replaced by a 3-spoke wheel for tilting steering wheel Corvettes. Gauges were restyled, and the ammeter was replaced by a voltmeter. The sun visors was redesigned to make a more modern design, a swiveling visor that would allow for side window use. Power steering and power brakes were now standard on the Corvettes, as well as paint-matched mirrors and cruise control becoming options. A new convenience option added dome light delays, a headlight warning buzzer, a low fuel light, interior lights, underhood lights, and a passenger side visor mirror. Engines regained their blue color and the Stingray moniker was dropped. The A-pillars were now painted black, the rear deck could now be optioned with a rack for better stowage of the T-tops, and the fastback increased interior storage, visibility, and aerodynamics for the Corvette with its introduction in 1978. The primary gauges and center console were restyled to have an aircraft-style look. The passenger side now had a glove box, and the interior door panels were redesigned. The car can now be optioned with power locks, powered antennas, dual rear speakers, and an upgraded audio. The convenience package now included instrumented wipers, floor mats, and the passenger visor mirror that were upgraded and given a light. The base L48 engine increased slightly in power to 185 horsepower, except for the Corvette's bound for California, which dropped to 175. The L82 engine was upgraded with a dual snorkel air intake and an aluminum intake manifold that dropped 24 pounds from the front end. The car's tire sizes switched from metric measurements as well, and a wider tire size could be optioned. The car's fuel tank was also increased from 17 to 24 gallons. For the 25th anniversary and Bill Mitchell's retirement, an appearance package gave the Corvette the first two-tone finish in a while, consisting of a silver body with a gray lower body. It had aluminum wheels and paint-matched mirrors. For 1979, an aerodynamic package was introduced, as were bucket seats and sunroofs. The new seats were standard, but they added comfort, eased storage access, and made the car about 24 pounds lighter. The aero package decreased drag and made the car ever so slightly more efficient. The T-top panels were now wired into the car's anti-theft systems. Radios and halogen high beams became standard equipment, and a cassette player was now an option in the car. Heavy-duty suspension can now be ordered without the off-road suspension package. An L82 with AC cars had extra cooling for the more potent engine. The rocker panels and rear window trim were now black. Later in the year, AC, tilting steering wheels, and power windows became standard equipment. New mufflers opened up power output, with the base L48 engine putting out 195 horses and the optional L82 putting down 225. The wide 4-speed manual was now available to the L48 cars rather than just the L82. 1979 was also an all-time high for the Corvette, which still stands to this day, moving 53,807 Corvettes in just 1 year. In 1980, the classic Corvette emblem was restyled to closer to what we know today. The hood was revised, and for all cars with the L82 engine, the engine badge moved from the hood to the fenders. The L82 produced 230 horses now, but could no longer be ordered with a manual transmission. In accordance to federal law, all Corvettes had a maximum speedometer rating of 85 miles per hour. The new convenience package and sport mirrors became standard issue. New options included independent rear suspension and axle components. This saved weight at the cost of strength. The aluminum intake was now standard on all cars, and the alternator mounts were replaced with aluminum. Due to encroaching California laws, Corvettes there were fitted with a unique 5-liter V8 that produced 180 horsepower, and it was the only option in California. And it was also required to be mated to an automatic transmission. The engine no longer controlled mechanically, and instead it was controlled by a computer. California buyers also had to pay extra due to California certification taxes. In 1981, only one engine option became available. Replacing the L48 and the L82 was the L81, a 5.7-liter V8 producing 190 horsepower. The engine now used a computer control unit from the California models and had the auxiliary cooling fan of one of the high-output engines. The Corvette now had unique leaf spring rear suspension, which saved 36 pounds, but it was also limited to base suspensions in cars with automatics. New options were power seats and remote mirrors, and midway through the year, production moved from St. Louis to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where it remains to this day. In 1982, the Crossfire upgrade made the Corvette fast and efficient. The engine used a sort of fuel injection, raising power to 200 horses. This engine had to be paired to a 4-speed automatic that had overdrive, which greatly improved the performance and efficiency, but proved to be problematic. To commemorate the final year of the C3, a special collector's edition was released, which gave the Corvette classic paint and styled rims and a hatchback. 1983 had no Corvettes. The C-3 had been discontinued in 1982, but the C-4 didn't arrive until 1984. The C-4 Corvette had a different focus than the other Corvettes from before. Unlike previous Corvettes that focused on power, the C-4 focused on handling. The C-4 was far lighter, using a plastic body instead of a fiberglass one. The Corvette was now close to unibody in construction and had a hatchback as well. The C-4 also had a digital instrument cluster. The C-4 Corvette returned to single headlights for the first time since 1957. The car had upgraded suspension and brakes to improve handling. Unlike the C-3, the Corvette did not have T-tops, instead opting for a single-piece target top this time. The Crossfire engine was the sole engine available, and it's 4-speed automatic. The C-4 Corvette was also the first Corvette without a proper grille. Otherwise, the C-4 Corvette represented the biggest technological jump between Corvettes and the highest MSRP for a Corvette when adjusted for inflation. After a praised launch that saw delight in many variety of things other than power, Chevrolet listened to criticisms and began upping the power of the Corvette. For 1985, the Crossfire engines were discontinued and the L98 was in, which used fuel injection, increasing power to 230 horsepower. The transmission saw a minor revision with a less intrusive overdrive, and the override button was moved to the shift knob, and the transmission was made more durable. For 1986, the car's technological prowess continued growing. The car now had a third brake light, a key-coded anti-theft system, an electronic climate control, and anti-lock brakes. And the convertible model made its return. The anti-theft system was a simple yet effective design that saw a small metal pellet with a very specific electrical resistance in the ignition slot. If an incorrect key was put in, the car would shut down the fuel pumps and starter systems for a target of 2 minutes, although some would remain on lockdown for up to 15 minutes. This helped reduce the 7% theft rate of the previous C4s down to almost zero, and insurance companies dropped the Corvette premium by about 25%. The engine's cylinder heads were switched from cast iron to aluminum, dropping 125 pounds from the front end, though it did cause reliability issues. However, other minor tweaks that reduced oil leaks and prevented overheating were introduced. A new handling package was available. The package reinforced the suspension, offered slightly bigger wheels, a thick anti-roll bar up the front, and a quicker steering ratio and chassis reinforcement. A low tire pressure indicator made a brief appearance but was found to throw up many false alarms. Callaway Corvettes also made their way to dealerships, packing a hefty price tag in exchange for 345 horsepower via twin turbos. For 1988, the L98 received a minor camshaft and cylinder head upgrade that bumped power slightly further to 245 horsepower. The muffler package was also improved, but only for coupes equipped with a 3.7 axle. Wheels were redesigned and able to hold bigger tires, but only Corvettes with handling packages received them, though standard rims did get a facelift. To improve tire durability, the steering was upgraded to have a zero scrub radius, meaning the tires would rotate directly above the center of contact. Rear suspension was given slightly more travel and less camber to improve straight-line stability. The brakes were strengthened, and the handbrake was then built into the system, rather than having separate drum brakes. The interior climate control was now offered with automatic climate control, and the airflow was improved. For 1989, the 4+3 manual transmission was finally replaced by a 6-speed manual transmission. The transmission would lock the driver out of second and third gear when the throttle was less than 35% open or when traveling 12 to 20 miles per hour, and the extremely tall 6th gear allowed the Corvette to dodge the gas guzzler tax. For those that didn't like a computer override, GM let slip that the system could be defeated by clipping a wire. For those equipped with the new manual, heavier cooling systems were installed as standard. Corvette also received drive modes that would slightly alter the suspension of the car for comfort, performance, or a mix of both. For 1990, passenger side airbags were introduced and made standard. Upgrades to compressions, camshaft, and intake, the L98 received more horses still, now pushing 245 horsepower. The Corvette's ABS system was upgraded to improve handling as well, and the optional cooling fan was discontinued with the addition of a new radiator that was so effective it made the fan pointless. The instrument cluster was revised for 1990 with a speedometer, tachometer, fuel gauge, oil gauge, battery gauge, and more. and a new CD player became optional for the first time, and it had an anti-theft system that would shut down the CD player if removed from the car. The passenger side received a glove box, and leather seats became an option. The ZR1 also made its return in 1990, being a very unaffordable but fearsome option. While the ZR1 was far out of reach for most, it cost significantly less than its rivals in Europe, and that trend continues today. The ZR1 was powered by a new LT5 engine. The LT5 engine fit into the same slot as the L98 and didn't diminish efficiency, and was still able to put down 375 horsepower. Compared to a Porsche 911, the ZR1 outperformed it in almost every way and still cost half as much. The ZR1 was difficult to distinguish and looked very similar to the normal Corvette despite new doors and fenders. The 1991 base Corvettes were facelifted to look even more like the ZR1. Sales then dropped dramatically with the introduction of the Dodge Viper, and the mid-engine C5 was scrapped due to financial engines at GM. And with such a massive sales drop, GM even considered discontinuing the Corvette entirely. A new electrical system in the Corvette allowed audio to keep playing even after the engine stopped, and would automatically turn off after either door was opened or after 15 minutes. The suspension packages were upgraded and the power steering was improved, as was the exhaust system. The Callaway turbo option was dropped from the RPO codes in 1991 as well. The C5 Corvette's introduction was put on hold as GM didn't have the money to research the new generation. For 1992, the C4 received a new engine option, the LT1. It still replaced 5.7 liters, but it put down 300 horsepower, bridging the gap between the base engine and the ZR1. The oil cooler was also discontinued for 1992, and traction control also appeared on the 1992 Corvette. In 1993, an aftermarket company released the G572, a modified C4 Corvette with a 9.4-liter V8 that produced 575 horsepower, a reinforced chassis, a 4-speed automatic, and new functional aero panels that made the Corvette look like a Pontiac Firebird that was made 8 years later. On regular Corvettes, keyless entry became standard on equipment, and new engine updates slightly bumped up torque and made the engine slightly quieter. For 1994, the passenger side glove box was deleted to make way for the new passenger airbag. Seats were widened slightly, and electric seats could now be controlled from the center console. A new electronic 4-speed automatic was introduced in place of the mechanical 4-speed, and the new transmission required the driver to depress the brake pedal in order to shift out of park. New wheels were also available as part of the ZR1 package, and leather seats became standard in all Corvettes. On convertible models, rear windows were now made of glass and had a built-in defogger. For all models, the new AC system was introduced to improve environmental friendliness, and a new 2-spoke steering wheel was also introduced. For 1995, a quieter engine fan and better injectors to improve fuel economy. For 1996, the ZR1 was discontinued, but the car gained an optional V8, producing an advertised 330 horsepower, though independent tests claim over 360 horsepower. The C4 received improved diagnostics and an optional improved damping system. And in 1997, the C5 Corvette was finally introduced. The new C5 was slightly longer and wider than the previous C4, but the wheels were pushed out to the corners of the car, which greatly improved performance. The car now had a lowered hood to provide extra visibility, and the body was redesigned to be the most aerodynamic Corvette to date. The car had gills just behind the fenders and a long cove in the door, in homage to the C1 Corvette. The C5 also had a taller rear end that helped with aerodynamics and trunk space, with the C5 having a hilarious 25 cubic feet of trunk space. The C5 also had a more spacious interior than its predecessors. The C5 also reverted back to analog gauges after the glitchy digital gauges of the C4. When activating the headlights, the gauges would be lit from behind, an effect that was considered otherworldly at the time. The C5 vastly improved the rigidity and precision of the Corvette's driving, and no convertible was actually offered for 1997. The new LS1 V8 took place of the standard, producing 345 horsepower and improving reliability. The new engine was large, barely fitting into the Corvette, and yet it weighed 45 pounds less than previous engines. The transmission was moved to the back of the car, giving the Corvette an almost 50-50 balance. The floor of the C5 Corvette was made of Ecuadorian balsa wood because it was lighter and quieter than other synthetic materials. The fuel tank was now in front of the rear axle to improve balance and cargo space. For 1998, the convertible was introduced again. This time, the convertible was planned from the start, so it didn't add much weight and it retained all the structural integrity of the coupe. In fact, the convertible only weighed 1 pound more than the coupe model, whereas convertibles usually weigh far more. For the first time since 1962, the Corvette had a trunk with the convertible model, while the coupe remained a hatchback. While it still operated manually, the convertible roof was far lighter and easier to move than before. For 1999, the FRC Corvette was introduced, which was a Corvette that was stripped of all the unnecessary features to both lower the price and lower the weight. The FRC exclusively came with a 6-speed manual transmission. Also new was the HUD option, which displayed gauge readings in the windshield instead of just the instrument cluster. The Corvette also now had optional telescoping steering wheels to change the position in the vehicle. All Corvettes received a more responsive power steering that was less prone to wandering, and all Corvettes received updated airbags. For the new millennium in the year 2000, the Corvette received dual-tone climate control, updated seatbelts, and updated seats. On the outside, the Corvette received new wheels. For 2001, the Corvette FRC was discontinued and replaced by the Z06, which used the same body but had horsepower and performance similar to the C4 ZR1. The Z06 used an LS6 V8 that produced 385 horsepower. Base model Corvettes increased in power to 350, and for 2002, the car received an updated radio system. Automatic transmissions were lightened slightly, and the handling package was improved. For cars equipped with a HUD, and for the Z06, the windshield is now slightly thinner to reduce just over 2 pounds in weight. The Z06 received more engine power, now putting out 405 horsepower. For 2003, a 50-year anniversary package was introduced, which painted the Corvette with a white exterior and red interior like the original 1953 model. A magnetic ride control system was now offered as standard, which made the Corvette smoother, quieter, flatter, and more agile. The Z06 did not receive the option due to the system adding 13 pounds. For 2004, a commemorative package was introduced to give special graphics and paint to the Corvette in honor of its return to racing. The Z06 commemorative was slightly more expensive as it dropped just over 10 pounds of the nose by giving it a carbon fiber hood. The commemorative Z06 also had a trial-by-fire suspension setup to improve handling. In 2005, the C6 Corvette was introduced. It had no Z06 and it was only a coupe on launch, though a convertible was available later in the year. The C6 was mostly intended as a revision of the C5. The C6 was the first Corvette since the C1 did not have pop-up headlights, which it lost due to growing concerns over the safety of pop-up headlights. The inside was only barely smaller and the exterior was much smaller to improve performance. The wheelbase was 1.6 inches longer, while the overall car was 5 inches shorter and 1 inch thinner. While the C5 was an homage to the C1, the C6 was an homage to the C2, though U.S. military aircraft also played a role in its design. Otherwise, the Corvette was mostly unchanged. For 2006, sensory systems in the cockpit allowed for the airbags to only deploy to occupied seats. XM radio was also made standard, and the previous 4-spoke steering wheel was replaced by a smaller 3-spoke. The previous 4-speed automatic was replaced by an optional 6-speed automatic that had 2 driving modes, those being the fully autonomous drive and the paddle-shifted sport mode. The 6-speed auto also came with a longer drive radio, improving fuel economy. The Z06 made a return, this time based on the hatchback Corvette rather than being a fixed-roof convertible. The Z06 did away with the targa top to remove rigidity, and the frame was redone in aluminum to reduce weight. The Z06 had a slightly different face and extra vents to differentiate it from the base coupe. The Z06 was now a luxury trim, including features like heated leather seats, satellite navigation, and a luxury sound system. The Z06 also had the first big block V8 in decades, a 7-liter V8 that produced 505 horsepower. The new LS7 and the Z06 also produced a wide power band, peaking at 475 foot-pounds of torque at 4,800 RPM. The Z06 also used carbon fiber fenders and floors to save weight. The base engine remained at 400 horses for 2006. For 2007, the interior received many updates. The ignition button now had labels, and the steering wheel could be used to control the radio. Color options for the seats are now available in addition to the sole monochrome standard. The exterior orange option was slightly changed as well. For 2008, the LS2 was replaced by the LS3, raising displacement to 6.2 liters and producing 430 horsepower. An optional dual-mode exhaust could optionally increase the horsepower to 436 horses by opening the exhaust. The manual transmission became tighter and the automatic paddle shifters became more responsive. A shorter 2.73 axle was now optional for automatic transmissions. The Corvette's steering was improved with a few modifications in the steering components. The interior was slightly facelifted and the Corvette had new optional wheels. In 2009, despite the chaos at GM, Chevrolet introduced the ZR1 again. This time it had 638 horsepower that came from a 6.2-liter V8 and a 6-speed manual transmission. The ZR1 had a famously bulged carbon hood with a window in it to see the supercharger on the engine. The front splitter and roof also used carbon fiber. The car also had a wide body and a custom spoiler that spanned to the rear of the vehicle. Other than the ZR1, the Corvette had a few new color options. In 2010, the Grand Sport was introduced as more or less of what the C5 Z06 was. It was a widened coupe or convertible with enhanced cooling, suspension, axle ratios, wider tires, and special cosmetics. The base Corvettes received a few new color options, and the convertibles now came with a Z06 spoiler regardless of equipment. In 2011, the Z06 Carbon Edition was launched, being a Z06 with extra carbon panels. Also new in 2011 was the engine building experience. For an extra $5,800, buyers of a Z06 or a ZR1 could fly out to the engine plant to personally build the engine of the Corvette. They can have lodging paid for while there and receive their Corvette personally at the factory. On base Corvettes, a new rim design was introduced, and a heavy brake option was added. 2 new color options were added, and the headlight can now be ordered with contrasting colors to the body. The headrests were redesigned, and the seats can now be ordered with contrasting stitching. On Corvettes with the advanced navigation radio option, the car now came with a USB port and an input audio jack. The magnetic ride option was introduced for the Grand Sport Corvette. In 2012, the Corvette arrived in the American Le Mans Series, taking 12 podiums in just 10 races, with 4 of those being wins and another 6 being runner-ups. In normal Corvettes, received updated seat designs in accordance to buyer feedback, as well as a new steering wheel, padded center consoles, and armrest, and optional equipment that include microfiber inserts, an updated sound system, leather interior, and more. The color of the Corvette's brake calipers could also now be optioned for yellow, silver, gray, or red. For 2013, a 60th anniversary edition could now be ordered. The anniversary edition gave the Corvette a white exterior and a custom blue-on-blue interior, and unique badging in and out of the car. For 2014, the new C7 Corvette was introduced. The new Corvette was stiffer and lighter than ever before by making use of an aluminum magnesium frame and carbon body panels. The convertible was now a soft top and was powered as standard. The powered roof could now be opened or closed to the key fob or done from inside the vehicle at speeds of up to 31 miles per hour. The Corvette had a new base engine, the LT1. The LT1 is a 6.2-liter V8 that produced 450 horses. The C7 also had a refined 7-speed manual transmission, and the car had a near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and it could achieve 1G in cornering grip. The car also came with xenon and LED lights now. The car was vastly redesigned inside and out, drastically moving away from the iconic Corvette look, and doing away with the twin-circle taillights for the first time since 1960. The 2014 Corvette introduced 2 new design packages, the Atlantic and Pacific. The Atlantic made the Corvette a luxury GT, while the Pacific made it a performance monster. The previous 6-speed automatic was replaced by an 8-speed automatic that acted similarly, albeit with new record-breaking shift times. The automatic could allow the V8-powered Corvette to achieve 29 miles per gallon and still be able to do 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds while shifting up with the throttle wide open. Despite having more gears, the new transmission was actually 8 pounds lighter than the outgoing 6-speed. For Corvettes equipped with a Navigator radio, the car can now also record performance data such as G-forces, speed, RPM, and more, all packed into a recorded video. The Corvette could now be optioned to have its own Wi-Fi hotspot built into the car, and the car had a variety of new options such as new wheel finishes, carbon fiber pieces, ground effects packages, vents, new wheels, spoilers, performance exhausts, and new colors. The base V8 was up to 460 horsepower. The Z06 also made a return for 2015 with a supercharged engine dubbed the LT4 that produced 650 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque. It was also the first Z06 to still come with a target top coupe, and the Z06 was also available as a convertible this time. The Z06 also had wider tires, carbon ceramic brakes, and a wide body. In 2016, front-facing parking cameras were introduced to reduce the Corvette's tendency to bite the curbs with the low splitter. This was available on higher trim Corvettes. Corvette also gained an 8-inch touchscreen compatible with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and new flat-bottomed and slightly smaller steering wheel was introduced. The trunks now had a power cinch functionality, removing the need for the driver to force the trunk closed. The Corvette also had new wheels, an optional new carbon weave hood, and new color options. For 2017, the C7 Grand Sport was introduced, packing bigger tires, unique rims, Brembo brakes, magnetic suspension as standard, electronic limited slip differential as standard, a performance exhaust to push 460 horsepower, a wide body, and the available Heritage Fender hash graphics, and the available Z07 package that further upgraded the Corvette with even better tires and ceramic brakes. On base Corvettes, dual USB ports, an SD reader, and the 9-speaker Bose system were now standard. In 2018, the Carb Edition was introduced, of which only 650 were built. 500 of those stayed in their homeland of America. The carbon panels helped the C7 achieve the perfect 50-50 balance. For the last C7, Chevrolet introduced the Z01 again in 2019. This time, the engine, dubbed the LT5, was a 6.2-liter V8 producing 755 horsepower, featuring a supercharger and dual fuel injection. The Z01 came standard with a low rear wing, and buyers could option for a 2-way adjustable high rear wing. All Z01 Corvettes had a functional front splitter and a wide body and unique front fascia. And of course, the base Corvettes received new color options. In 2020, Chevrolet introduced the controversial C8 Corvette. After decades of requests for a mid-engine Corvette, it finally happened, and of course it was delayed for a few months by a worker strike. The C8 was an instant hit, so popular that Chevrolet had to stop taking orders just to keep up demand that was buying Corvettes at almost double the MSRP, and still employee lots at the Corvette plant were full until midnight just to crank up production of America's sports car. The new C8 had the engine in the back as its most distinctive feature, but despite being a larger Corvette, it was more compactly designed and it had less storage space, and it was the first Corvette that wasn't a hatchback since 1982. The new Corvette departed from the iconic American muscle styling that had become the image of the Corvette and pushed the cab forward design to make it a European wedge. The Corvette gained a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, but now the driver had an almost uncomfortable placement forward of the center of mass. Again, the convertible version came out a few months behind. The C8 was also the first Corvette since 1954 to not have an option for the manual, as the C8 exclusively had an 8-speed dual clutch with paddle shifters sourced from Tremec, which was the fastest transmission on the planet at the time. The new standard engine was still a 6.2-liter V8, but it now produced 490 horsepower standard, or 495 horsepower if equipped with the performance exhaust. The 2021 Corvette launched early with the 2 new color options, and options for a full-length stripe over the top in 3 colors. Magnetic ride control could now be ordered independent of the handling package, and the C8 received Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. In 2022, the Corvette now had 3 seat options, all made with leather. In 2023, the Corvette received the Z06 one again, but it was now of European influence. It had a smaller 5.5-liter V8 that ditched the American crossplane for a flat plane to produce a horse-biased 670 horsepower and 460 foot-pounds of torque. In addition, the Z06 gives the Corvette a wide body and larger tires as before. In 2024, the first hybrid Corvette arrived at dealers, the E-Ray. The E-Ray is also the first four-wheel drive Corvette and takes much of the Z06 body for use except for the Mach grille. The E-Ray has a different grille on it. The E-Ray uses the standard Stingray engine and transmission as well. The E-Ray also uses carbon ceramic brakes as standard. The E-Ray also has a stealth mode, allowing the Corvette to get up to 45 miles per hour for about 4 miles, in an all-electric mode with only a slight sound to alert people ahead of the vehicle. The E-Ray's front axle motor produces a total of 150 horsepower up to 140 miles per hour when they must disconnect. For 2025, the ZR1 returned, but it didn't have its iconic supercharger. Instead, the ZR1 had a twin hybrid turbocharged version of the 5.5-liter flat plane from the Z06. The engine was rated at 1,064 horsepower, the first Corvette to mark the 1,000 mark, and the first to use a twin turbo setup from factory. This number is supposedly underrated, with independent tests claiming north of 1,200 horsepower. The LT7 is also heavily horse-biased, producing 825 foot-pounds of torque. The C801 can do 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds and run a quarter mile at 9.6 seconds at over 152 miles per hour, still scrambling for traction. The Z01 also brings back the split window from the 1960s and has a variety of aero parts on top of the wide body. The Z01 became the fastest American car to ever lap the Nürburgring. And then this year, in 2025, the unbelievable was revealed. The ZR1X, an absurd hybrid ZR1, utilizing a slightly more powerful version of the E-Ray hybrid and the engine from the ZR1. With the 1,200 horse LT7 and the 186 horse hybrid system, the ZR1X can produce up to about 1,400 horsepower in all-wheel drive. The hybrid motors last up to 150 miles per hour, which causes issues when the sudden disconnect of power of the front would cause the rear tires to lose traction at 150 miles per hour because the engine is too strong. The ZR1X took the American car Nürburgring from its own twin by lapping the green hell in 6 minutes and 49 seconds. This year, concepts came out that implied a new C9 Corvette is coming soon, which will likely have an even more forward-heavy cab and a smaller engine. Other updates for 2026 Corvettes is a new color option. The Corvettes can now be optioned in green. But that is all of the Corvette production history. If you enjoyed today's episode, please keep in mind that you can find the podcast on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube under the same Cars with Kasey name. And on Instagram and YouTube, I can be found under the account name Tavling Appa. That's Tavling, Tavling, Appa, APA. I've enjoyed talking to you in this episode, and I look forward to talking to you in the next.